think they have dropped. So I'm just checking.
We have them back, Sukanya.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Ranjan, for joining us. We are actually on live right now, so I would like to take the permission of my chairpersons and start our today's session.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to the workshop on creating values through ESG organized by the Corporate Governance and CSR Committee of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry in association with Exide Industries Limited, powered by CESC Limited and supported by Berger Paints India Limited. The session has been curated by our knowledge associate, Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu India LLP. For the ease of smooth flow of the program, we would like to request all our participants to join through Facebook, YouTube, and all our speakers have joined through Zoom. Participants can write the questions in the chat box during the Q&A session after each session gets over. Without further ado, I would now like to request our chairperson of the Corporate Governance and CSR Committee, Mr. Jitendra Kumar, who is also the Company Secretary and President, Legal and Corporate Affairs, Exide Industries Limited, to formally give the welcome address. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Sukanya, and good afternoon to all my panelists and also everybody who are attending this meeting on a very, I would say, it's a very interesting topic on creating value through ESG. So last month we had a meeting of our Corporate Governance Committee, and all the members of the committee felt that I think ESG is the right topic to consider in a full session on this ESG, because I think ESG is a growing prominence since last couple of years, if not more, and more stakeholders, be it from regulators, be it from investor community, be it from our internal, be it from corporate governance requirement, there's a lot of emphasis being put on this particular ESG topic. So therefore, we committee thought that let us have a full session on this particular ESG topic. And our co-chair, Mr. Abhijit Da, he was very helpful and organized the senior partners and the colleagues from Deloitte to become a speakers on this particular session. So thanks, Abhijit Da, our co-chair of this committee. So, I would like to welcome first, I just like to introduce our co-panelists. So we have our session moderator, Mr. Subhranshu Patnaik, who is partner in consulting on power and utilities in Deloitte. And we have Mr. Abhinav Prasad, who is the associate director, again belonging to Deloitte. And on this ESG reporting and priorities, we have Mr. Charu Gupta to speak on this particular topic. And finally, from the industry side, we have Mr. N.P. Srivastava, and we have Mr. Nitish Ranjan, who is part of Environmental of Steel Authority of India Limited. And finally, our co-chair, Mr. Abhijit Bandyopadhyay, who is always there for this particular meeting. So welcome, Mr. Abhijit Da, and all other fellow panelists. So, before I'm going to start and talk something on the ESG, though I'm not an expert, and I think I'm going to hear from my expert panelist. So, what ESG means to me, I would just try to briefly explain in maybe a couple of minutes, and then we will hand it over to our expert panelist. So, nowadays, if you see this, the particular from the regulatory side, the government is thrusting more and more emphasis on the ESG. Particularly for the listed companies, you must be knowing that there is a requirement on disclosure on the BRR. And now from next year onwards, there will be more disclosure on the BRSR, which is business responsibility and sustainability reporting. So therefore, there is a thrust from the government side, and particularly from the investor community side. At least during the last week, I was also pleasantly surprised when a couple of investors forced us in my company to have a separate session on what is the plan of the company on the ESG side. So that is the importance which is growing in the investors community, particularly from the large investors. So they are now looking at the companies and want to know how the companies are going to, and what are the plans and what kind of target they are setting on the ESG. So now talking about ESG, I think to a common people like us, at least it's basically three things, simple things. One is E stands for environment, social, and governance. So when I was young, and when we were during our colleges or beginning of the career, when we were told about look at the strength of the company. So we were asked to see the balance sheet of a company and see the financial, the reporting process to judge a company whether company is good or great. But I think that concept is now slowly changing, and now just reading the financial parameters of balance sheet or P&L, that is not sufficient for our investors or for any government or any stakeholders to judge a company. So I think it is the non-financial parameters, particularly on this ESG. So these are becoming the benchmark on how a company is doing in this in their own respective field. So it's not only about financial; it's all about of non-financials. And I think more and more emphasis is going to come on the disclosure on the ESG parameters. Like even in my company, Exide, so we were doing so many things on the part of ESG, but it was not done in a structured manner. So last couple of years, we have started to put more structure to this entire disclosure on the ESG and come out with a separate, either in a BRSR or committed sustainability reporting or integrated reporting kind of thing. So with this kind of disclosure going to the public domain, then the stakeholders, the shareholders, and the entire community would like to know whether they are going to invest in the company or not. Those companies who are doing better on the ESG will definitely add more premium to the market value than those companies who are not doing that kind of rate in the ESG. So one simple incident I would like to narrate before this meeting. So in few months back, particularly in the October, I happened to meet our Honorable President in Parliament because of some CSR event. So he spoke to us for about 15-20 minutes. And during this entire 15 minutes, he spoke on a particular topic. Though he never named this word ESG, but he gave a classic example. Like, he told that whenever he used to meet very successful people, and I think it's a very norms for him. And a lot of people come and say that, and when he used to ask one question, what is the success behind, what is the kind of effort behind your success, and whom do you want to give the credit? So most of the persons to whom he was asking, so they were referring to that, it is my effort, it is because of my parents' effort. So, but it was because mainly on the ecosystem surrounding that. So then our president told that, do you remember who took, when you were young, a student, who do you take, to the school? Was there any maid servant? Was there any auto rickshaw or bus driver who took you to the school, colleges when you joined the company first? So was there any office peon who used to serve the tea? Probably not. We don't remember them. But these are the effort of those unknown people, the social ecosystems which we are working in that. So this helps us a great way to see where we stand today. So, I mean, this is all the recognition of ESG. I mean, it's very simple that, means how we are treating environment, how we are behaving on social front, how we are behaving on the governance stage. So this becomes, rather than obligation, this should come from our within. It should not be looked, it could be from corporate side, it could be from an individual side also. So it is our responsibility to leave a better world for us, rather than looking at a purely disclosure obligations. So I think this very particular topic touched me a lot. So I thought I should just try to, share with all of you. So I think one more, example I would like to give before I hand it over to my fellow panelists. I mean, just describing how this ESG has become more important. So you must be knowing that this Coca-Cola company lost $4 billion in market value when this Cristiano Ronaldo sends this Coke in that advertisement. So the company lost $4 billion. So this is the impact of or non-managing this ESG mechanism. Even Nike, the famous brand, lost almost half of its market capitalization in 1 year after the picture of a Pakistani boy swinging a Nike soccer ball for 6 cents an hour was shown in the Life magazine. So these are, I think some of the, fact which we are not going to ignore, particularly the big corporates, big entities. So we have no choice but to, look after this ESG mechanism. So I think I've taken a lot of time. Now, without wasting my time, I would first briefly describe how we are going to conduct this session. So there are total 3 sessions. One is on the ESG overview and current trends, which will be moderated by Mr. Patnaik, as I told, and Mr. Abhinav Prasad. He is going to take over this session, which will be followed by a short Q&A. So we would like to take a couple of questions on this particular topic. Then we will quickly move to another session on the ESG reporting side, as well as BRSR and other prominent reporting framework. This will be taken up by Mr. Charu Gupta. And on the final industry perspective, so we have Mr. Srivastava and Mr. Nitesh Ranjan from Steel Authority of India Limited. They will share their experience and how they are going to implemented this ESG in their company, followed by a Q&A. So we have a short Q&A after each of the 3 sessions, and followed by a closing remarks by our co-chair, Mr. Abhijit Bandyopadhyay. And we try to wrap this entire session in 90 minutes, around 6 o'clock or so. So with this, I welcome Mr. Shubhranshu Patnaik to take it forward, our next session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar. And it's an honor to be amongst the BCC&I community. So thank you for having us here. My name is Shubhranshu. As Mr. Kumar mentioned, I'm a partner with Deloitte. I oversee sustainability and climate change. And what we'll do today is start with providing you an overview of the ESG, drivers and framework. Why is it so important today? We all hear this term currently, and we all recognize the fact that ESG is integral to all businesses, right? Every organization is impacted by the ESG elements. Every organization is impacted by the environment and impacts the environment in one way or the other. We all draw resources from the for our operations, whether it's energy or any other form of resources. And so that impacts environment. We operate in a social milieu, and therefore social parameters are very, very important. And governance is, of course, integral to any legal construct of business, more so in also assessing risks of sustainability going forward, sustainable business operations going forward, right? So ESG is therefore integral to all business. It doesn't leave out any business, interestingly, at this point in time. What has changed? What has changed of late? Of course, the biggest change that we see, or the biggest focus that has come from an ESG perspective, is the climate change, problem that has surfaced over the last decade or so intensively. It has been boiling for the last 3 to 4 decades, but obviously the light has shone over the last decade intensively over the climate change problem that confronts humanity together. And the biggest stakeholder in this journey, apart from governments, is expected to be corporates as well, right? Corporates account for a bulk of the emissions, industries in particular. And so therefore, they are expected to join in solving this greatest threat that our planet faces since humans walked the Earth. And so this is one of the reasons why such great focus has come over ESG. And you will see this translating into actions that's called upon from investors the investor community, as Mr. Kumar was giving an example of, employees increasingly so. Internally, we have examples of employees actually not favoring to join organizations which have poorer ESG scores, and there are scores of those examples. And then most importantly, your customers, right? And so therefore, that is also an important parameter which shapes ESG frameworks and focus going forward. Now, we will talk in particular around two factors within the ESG frame in this session. One is, what is it that guards value from an organization perspective, right? I'll put it in two buckets. What is it that guards your value? Because there are actions that the cost of inaction on the ESG front can lead to value destruction. We're seeing that all around, right? It can extend to these most severe forms of, let's say, not having mandates to operate, or not having mandates to be able to supply products to your existing set of customers. And so therefore guarding against exclusions, both from a product standpoint, operation standpoint, keeping ahead of regulations in these regards, whether it is to do with your core products or packaging, raw materials or waste, all of that. So therefore guarding value, one aspect, but more importantly, how do you create value in an ESG frame where the world is changing towards a new future, right? From an energy standpoint, from the way the world operates in the future, in a decarbonized setup, how do you identify what could be value creators in this frame in terms of defining your strategy, which is more sustainable going forward, in terms of creating a brand differentiation and product differentiation, which can give you a fillip in terms of value creation, top line growth, as well as bottom line. And then maybe also looking at your innovation from a, as I said, riding the disruption to create value. And I'll leave you with a small example before I invite Abhinav. We did actually a study very recently. It's up there on our website. For those who are interested, can reach out to me. I'll send you a copy as well. It's called Turning Point. And we modeled what would be India's energy footprint and what will be the cost of inaction of India's economy if climate inaction or business as usual is perpetrated into the future. And the cost of inaction is as high as 35 trillion USD from an economy, from a GDP perspective, cumulatively until 2070. And there are 5 most affected industry segments which we projected would take the maximum hit in this regard. As opposed to India seizing this opportunity, there'll be new value chains created, there'll be new opportunities from the construct of clean operations, how the industry reorganizes itself. And if we were able to seize that opportunity, by 2070, we would have not just saved the 35 trillion of losses that I talked about, but additionally created 11 trillion additional economic value. And so the report actually addresses those in some detail. But I'll just stop here. We bring it back to corporates, not really at the overall country level, but it just gives us a snapshot of how ESG is perceived at various levels. So let me invite Abhinav. Abhinav is an associate director with us in the ESG practice, advises a lot of corporates on ESG framework, strategy, and pathways. So Abhinav, over to you to walk us through what are the mega trends that businesses are experiencing from an ESG standpoint, and how does one look at value creation?
Sure. Thank you, Shubhranshu. So just take a step back and just quickly talk about what are the key constructs of ESG. Within ESG, what are the key KPIs that all the stakeholders are concerned about. So under environment, essentially waste and circularity. It was our assumption that Earth's resources are finite and Earth's waste carrying capacity was also infinite. But the reality is the resources as well as the carrying capacity of Earth is limited. Hence, there's a need to completely do away with a linear model of business operations, that you take resources and then create products and services and then generate waste. So that has to now be circular. So waste and circularity is a very, very key important part of under environment pillar. The second is important is energy consumption. And what is also important for stakeholders is to also see what is the specific energy consumption in terms of the value created or the products produced. The third most important one related to energy, obviously, I've highlighted here in yellow, is climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. Among all the ESG risks that we're talking about, climate change and greenhouse gas emissions stands out in terms of its importance. Because we are facing climate change and we have already reached a tipping point as per the scientific bodies. And then water. So there is a nexus of climate change, water, energy. So water is also a very important parameter. And then there are other environmental parameters, which are also kind of taken into account through environmental compliances. And then the targets and matrices that companies are taking. So stakeholders, especially the investors, are wanting to know, have you started monitoring all these KPIs? Have you started taking targets? Do you have strategy and roadmap to reduce those footprints? The second most important pillar is social. Essentially, the social has the employees, the community where the business kind of is located, and then also the ecosystem partners like suppliers and others. So the labor aspect, the health and safety aspect, the human rights aspects, diversity and inclusion are now not only kind of are important for a company's own resources, but to a large extent, companies also, the responsibility translates to the suppliers. So any ESG risk in the supply chain is also partly attributed to companies and its policies. Then you have issues on data security, vendor management, customer privacy. These are very, very important areas that companies should certainly have a kind of robust mechanism to ensure compliance and stewardship. The third important pillar is governance, how the company operates, how the top level is involved in identifying and also ensuring mitigation of ESG risks. Whether ESG is integrated in traditional enterprise risk management system is an important part of governance now. It's not only the bottom line, it's actually a triple bottom line. The people, the planet, and the profit together. I just wanted to quickly give an overview of all these sectors and what are the key ESG scores of different sectors put together. Because if we ask, are all companies exposed to ESG risk at the same level? Or the impact of businesses on the people and the environment are same, with all the sectoral companies? The answer is no. One company may be environmentally very benign, but on the other hand, the social angle will be very, very important and impactful. For example, if you see on the left side, the IT, financial, power, renewables, these sectors have very low environmental footprint. Hence, their overall ESG score is high. And also the social aspect is also well taken care of, or the social and environmental risks posed to these companies are relatively lesser compared to the companies on the right side, like cement, the hard to abate sectors, oil and gas, metals mining, and FMCG, which are dealing in cigarettes, alcohol, and others. So this gives an overview of the relative ESG risk or performance of different sector companies. Now, as rightly pointed by speakers before me. So ESG started as a moral imperative, but over the past few years, it has become a business imperative. And why it's so? As per the global survey, 90% of S&P 500 index companies are already reporting sustainability reports, disclosing sustainability reports. 86% of employees expect the CEOs to publicly speak on important aspects on environment and the social issues. 7 in 10 people globally support organizing consumer boycotts if there is a need be for irresponsible companies. There's also some value that organizations who are doing great in ESG to derive. 5 to 7%, there can be enhancement of the value, the market value for those companies who are doing great in ESG. Then there is a risk angle as well. For companies who are not doing adequately well in ESG under different pillars, tend to be rated low in ESG. And since ESG has now become a business imperative, which means that the investors are also looking at the ESG score. So given two companies, if their financial performance are equal and similar, what will differentiate them is their ESG scores. So if a company has a relatively higher risk under ESG under different pillars, will tend to be less favored. Even the cost of capital, for example, for companies who are more into fossil fuel-based industries, dependent heavily on fossil fuel-based industries, and are exposed to the physical impacts of climate change, the cost of capital for them will be relatively higher compared to other companies. Even at a national scale, if a country is exposed to climate change more intensely, the cost of capital for those countries will also tend to be higher. Here, one key takeaway from this slide we wanted to present, as I mentioned in the first slide, that climate change among all the ESGs, all other ESG issues are also very, very important. But climate change stands out because that is, faces a great challenge for the humanity, essentially because once we reach a tipping point, it's very hard to reverse it. The impacts will be seen and it will be increasing. Because what is a fact is the human induced emissions, once they're in the atmosphere, stays in the atmosphere for 100 years. So if there was any emission 100 years back, that is still there and causing global warming. So as scientists say, a tipping point has already reached. So what is important to immediately go for? Low carbon transition. So this slide particularly depicts a correlation between the GDP, the energy, the rise in global temperature, and the rising sea level as well. So over 100 since the Industrial Revolution began, there's a 100-fold increase in the GDP, global GDP. There's a 20-fold increase in the global energy use. And there is a rise of global temperature by 1 degree centigrade. It looks very small, but it's a global average. There is a recent there's a news, recently that in Antarctica and the polar regions, the rise in temperature seen this month has been above 40 degrees from normal. So in March, the temperature in the polar region used to be 55 degrees centigrade. Now it is 15 degrees. This is very, very alarming. So scientists are saying that all climate models were very conservative in terms of pronouncing the impacts. It's already happening. So it's very important for, it's a entire overall responsibility for all the countries put together, but also companies are expected to take active mitigation targets. So how does climate change impacts? It impacts the workforce because it impacts the GDP. For every 1.5 degree rise in temperature, the GDP will be impacted by 7%. How does it impact the workforce? So the labor productivity will decrease because of the rising temperature. And we're talking about 1 degree rise in the centigrade, 1 degree rise in temperature, but in some regions the rise will be 10 degrees. So just imagine the impact on the labor productivity. And on the workplace as well. It is, as per the climate models, 80 airports can come under water because of the rising sea levels. So what is important for now businesses to also, think innovatively and transition towards a low carbon operations. It is not easy. It is very challenging because alternatives are still emerging. It is not, maybe technologically and commercially viable at this point in time to completely switch over. So we are talking about transition and we are not talking about switch over. If it was an option for switch over, it was easy, but we have to transition. But the initial steps has to be taken now. I'll leave, end my presentation with this thought, and happy to take questions on this topic.
Thank you so much, sir.
Mr. Prashant, if I can ask, start with one question from my side.
Sure.
Like, for many companies, who have not started this ESG journey or who is about to start this ESG journey. So starting from, their journey till the maybe coming with a full-fledged report, be it on the IR or be it on the sustainability reporting. What are the broad steps which a company needs to do to comply with the ESG requirement, as well as the practice normally the governance or the government wants us to follow. Can you just briefly explain the process and the action which needs to be taken on this?
Yeah, certainly. That's a very good question. Because as I mentioned, there are many KPIs that needs to be monitored within the organization under the E, S, and G pillars. And the reporting or disclosing the ESG performance started in early 2000. Previous to that, what company used to report was essentially on the corporate social responsibility aspects that were anyways taking up. But since early 2000, a global framework came into existence called GRI, Global Reporting Initiative. And that framework itself, sorry, if there is a, okay. So that framework itself took several, versions of enhancement. And there are over 80 KPIs that company has to take into account, see if they're relevant to them. And also once they have identified that it is relevant, they have to start capturing the data on those aspects. So the point is, unless you measure, you'll not be able to manage. If you're not able to manage, you'll not be able to change. So its first step is to identify what are the key elements that are relevant to your business, and then have systems in place to kind of monitor those and towards the end of the financial year, report it. So there are plethora of ESG frameworks into existence. GRI is one of the most prominent because it started quite early. But in recent times, there are many other ESG frameworks as well, which my colleague and fellow panelist Charu Gupta will be talking about in detail. But the point is, all these frameworks are also talking on the same topics. They are also converging in to a large extent. So it's the choice of companies to take up one framework and then start building systems to capture those data. While some of the ESG frameworks are very topic specific, for example, TCFD, Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, that essentially deals with the climate change risks that the company faces. But overall, the point is, choose any of the frameworks. Some of the frameworks are mandatory for certain countries. For example, in India, what is become mandatory from the next year is BRSR, again, which my fellow colleagues will be talking about in detail. So did I answer your question adequately, sir?
Yes.
Maybe I can come in, Abhinav, and add a few points. So one is around disclosures, of course, which is a big part of the journey. But just like we were discussing around responsibilities, what the stakeholders' expectations are is with regards to what will you do from an ESG perspective, right, going forward. So baselining, understanding what your baseline is with regards to emissions, with regards to waste, with regards to where you stand socially, on your social framework and such is very, very important. But then you also have to put in a frame around what actions you're going to take, for instance, towards net zero, for instance, towards greater engagement with the society, and so on and so forth. So that is something that you have to determine through an ESG strategy, right? So companies which do not have an ESG strategy possibly need to first start with baselining and then put an ESG strategy in place. There are frameworks available, for instance, the Science-Based Target Initiative, which is a framework available to define what pathways you could take from a GSG perspective. But effectively, it comes back to a strategy that you have to formulate for yourself around what are the targets you take on from the perspective of bending the curve from emissions perspective, and and so on and so forth. So that's a specific scientific approach that you need to take. And then, of course, bake in ESG into your reporting and risk-related practices, right? So are you assessing risks properly with regards to sustainability going forward? Have you factored it all in? And are you reporting that on a regular basis? So those are all definitely important elements that will build your relationship with the stakeholder community around ESG.
So since there is no further question on that.
Sir, we have got 2 more questions actually for this session.
Yeah, please.
So the first question has been asked by Mr. Abhimanyu Das, saying that how can we relate the relevance of ESG as a vital ingredient towards globalization? And the second question, which has come up from another senior representative of a company, is that how do companies attract, develop, and retain the leadership talent and skills needed to drive ESG and sustainability strategy and outcomes? So if any one of you can.
I think excellent questions. So let me take a shot at the first one. I think it's not difficult to imagine that we operate in a globalized world as far as products and services are concerned. Supply chains are more and more integrated globally, right? So what actions get taken in a particular industry segment with regards to ESG mandates? So for instance, if there are actions which get taken by your suppliers or your consumers, you're in a B2B business, let's imagine that, and you procure your raw materials from a particular set of suppliers, and you provide your goods to a set of consumers on the other end, and they start to procure from certain organizations with ESG mandates, with specific ESG requirements, and you haven't transitioned to that construct, then you start to lose out. This is exactly the element that I was talking about from an exclusion standpoint, but also determining this ahead of time and making sure that from your perspective also, you build in obligations for your suppliers and also with regards to businesses that you supply to. So we utilize a framework which Abhinav spoke about lightly. We will dive into that a little more around scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 obligations. Particularly around scope 2 is where you start to really look at supply chains and elements of that, scope 2 and scope 3. And therefore, those are elements where, since you operate in a globalized world, the implications of ESG is industry-wide and cross-industry wide. And so therefore, it is not individual action which matters. If the industry is taking action towards, let's say, a commodity which is going to be branded as green and therefore procured as green, for instance, the move towards, let's say, green steel or green cement, and you haven't transitioned onto that, then there could be an exclusion threat overall. Now, the second question around leadership, I think is a great question. It depends on what you're trying to address. Though ESG looks like a common theme, as you would have gleaned, it's actually three very, very different topics bundled into one. Environment is so topical. It is basically dominated by energy and other resources. Energy plays a big part, but other resources also, waste and water and such, also play a major part of that focus. So that is more integral to your business operations. But social and governance is so different. And so therefore expecting one set of leaders to be able to control all three actions starts to become a challenge. So therefore, while you look for talent, which is obviously aligned to what the regulatory environment is, understands the overall implications of ESG in action and actions, I think as you start to action it out, you need the involvement of a larger group, which is aligned to what actions you're taking. So if it is energy related actions, you'll have to really make sure that the whole of the business starts to contribute to it and you build out resourcing along those lines. So not an easy solution. While we look at ESG leadership, which is anyway at a premium now, it's not easy to find good ESG leaders. It also is a challenge when you transit to actual implementation. So yes, I think you have to look at it through different lenses, and ESG is not one subject. Unfortunately, it is a combination of quite different things put together in a way.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Patnaik. We would now like to move on to our next session and would request Mr. Patnaik to carry forward and invite our next speaker, Mr. Charu Gupta.
Thank you. Thanks, Sukanya. So we'll move on to dive deeper a little into the reporting requirements and stakeholder expectations in particular around ESG reporting. So let me hand it over to Charu, who can walk us through first the overall landscape and then probably more contextually what applies to us in India in the second phase of the presentation. So Charu, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Shubhranshu, and thank you, Avinav, also for setting up this context for this second session, wherein I think we are now at a point where we should be speaking about, yes, we know ESG, the importance around that, who are the stakeholders that look about that. So now comes the aspect, okay, what we have to do and how we have to communicate it back to those stakeholders where there are expectations around. So as we understood in the previous slide, previous presentation also, it's about the environment bit, the social bit, and the governance bit. And these are the three core pillars that are very closely integrated. So as Shubhranshu just now explained around the role of ESG, ESG is now is more like a function in any organization. Like we have the finance function, we have the accounts section, we have the sales section, and they are integrated. Similarly, ESG also is now a function which very closely integrates with all the other functions that were present earlier, be it HR function, be it sales. So as we move, as you will go a little deeper in ESG, you will understand that probably making decisions around procuring ESG or sustainable products, you need to make changes in your supply chain department. Similarly, on the finance side, how you can make decisions to take only those type of projects which have a climate risk angle also involved. So with all these things happening, yes, there are expectations from the stakeholders, they need to understand that as per their expectations, what actions the corporate are taking. And at that moment, reporting does come handy as a thing wherein corporates can showcase the actions that they are taking around, be it around environment front, climate change related aspects, be it on the social front, how they are empowering their people, increasing diversity, what actions are they taking, and then overall the governance framework, how they are enabling their decision-making process, involve sustainability and ESG with overall people sitting at the board level also, who drive the entire ESG for the firm, for the corporates, and also there are then subcommittees under each head who take up activities at each type of function level. So coming to the trend part of that, why is disclosure necessary and why it matters? Because it very clearly demonstrates an interlinking between the company, what they think about sustainability and what are the actions they are taking. It is a clear-cut linkage wherein thoughts, the vision, the strategies, they are put into actions and reported. And this provides a medium to be transparent to the stakeholders for whom they are running the business, of whom they are accountable for, be it at the business level or be it at the ESG level. And while doing this, corporates do get a chance to improve their existing systems and processes, aligning in more towards the best practices available globally. And lastly, but most importantly, meet the regulatory requirements also that have been coming up in rise of the recent changes around ESG related. And we have now very much regulation coming on mandatory reporting of BRSR. So while taking up these activities, corporates do also make themselves ready for the regulations that are in place. Now, can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So what Deloitte keeps on doing surveys, and this is from a survey, I think there were around 200 plus companies covered on that. What they feel is the regulatory push has enhanced 99% of reporting. Almost 99% of these surveyed companies have been reporting, and this is on account of the push from the regulators, which was around SEBI, mandating reporting called BRR earlier, which now would be BRSR. And 20% of these have already moved to a step ahead, wherein they have taken up integrated reporting, another guideline, another framework that we'll speak a little later. They have already adopted to that. 43% of these companies do their external assurance of their reporting, wherein they appoint a party, a third party, likes of accounting and financing audit parties, who come and review their and assure their non-financial parameters, which are reported in the ESG reporting. 50% of these companies also acknowledge climate as a risk, which is definitely one of the most important parameters under the environment bit at the moment, with countries also aligning to carbon neutrality commitments. Climate change definitely is one of the biggest risks for corporates, both at physical level and at also transactional level. So 50% of companies do acknowledge that. Just a bit back up in the last bit I wanted to go. And most importantly, we have seen so many things happening around the social fund globally. So 60% of the companies also acknowledge human rights. And moreover, 89% of these companies already have policies related to human rights in place. So these are all the actions that are being taken and then communicated through the sustainability and ESG reports. Can move to next slide, please, Avna. Thank you. So now we talk about a little about how this process happens. I think Mr. Jitendra asked this question at the end of the previous session. So it is an integrated approach that is followed by corporates around that, wherein they start with understanding their needs, which is, as Shubhranshu mentioned, understanding their baseline, where they are. Then also having an understanding on what are the stakeholder requirements and determining materiality, what is named as the key material issues, important aspects around ESG that are very critical for their businesses. while there may be some aspects which are important, but some of these will be very critical for businesses. Let's say for a beverage company, availability of water will be very critical for them at their plant sources. So similarly, they need to do an assessment wherein they find these material topics. Once these are established, they build up their systems, refine the operations and processes around that to take actions on these, and also build up processes and systems to monitor on these aspects, which are the larger bouquet of ESG aspects, but more closely, more precisely on these material topics also. And as monitoring happens, there are actions taken on their improvement. There is also a process laid down to annually make them in a report, which can be in a voluntary form, where there are several guidelines available to convert this data into a voluntary report, or regulation like BRSR now we have in place, which also provides a guideline that how this data has to be represented in a form of report for regulators and other stakeholders for their consumption. Next slide, please, Avina. So now we will speak a little about the BRSR, because it is one of the prominent reporting frameworks that India is speaking about, which is in the voluntary phase for this financial year, current financial year. Next year, it will be mandatory for the top 1,000 listed companies. Next slide, please, Una. So we'll very briefly touch upon the history of ESG evolution and reporting in India. So we had these NVGs long back in 2011, after which SEBI, through a circular, included top 100 listed companies to disclose their reporting as business responsibility reporting. Thereafter, there were other advancements also. And further, SEBI extended it to top 500 companies and top 1,000 companies. But till that time, till 2019, it was mostly around BRR that we were talking about. Very recently, SEBI has now taken up a revised version of BRR, which they call as BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting Framework, which for the current year, as I indicated, is voluntary for top 1,000, and other companies, other corporates also can take it up at a voluntary basis. But next year, which is financial year 2023, it will be a mandatory reporting framework for top 1,000 listed companies. Next slide, please, Anna. So very briefly, we just talked about it. It is voluntary in FY22, while it is also voluntary for other companies. It will be mandatory for top 1,000 listed companies in FY23. It also allows a flexibility for corporates who are into sustainability reporting using other frameworks. They can also have BRSR provides this flexibility to cross-reference the disclosures with other frameworks. The important aspect to understand is SEBI has provided two types of formats. One is the comprehensive, which is the mandatory for top 1,000, and then there's a lighter version also for new corporates who want to initiate their journey in ESG. So they can adopt this lighter version, which is more like a voluntary type also. Choose what they want to report, and then they can start, and as they learn, as they grow, they can also take up the comprehensive version of the reporting. Overall, BRSR divides into three sections. One is around the general disclosures, which are like company details, employees, CSR activities, etc., etc. And then there is a section on governance aspects, which is how the management is aligned, what are the policies in place, how the governance structure is established around ESG. And third is the most important and most critical, wherein corporates have to report their performance on the environment and social bits and governance bits, and also provide the outcomes. Another important aspect which comes in the next slide is that SEBI do talk about two aspects in all these, which is, next slide please, Avina, which is around leadership indicators and essential indicators. So these are part of both environment and social disclosures, wherein there are some mandatory indicators called as essential indicators, which all the 1,000 listed companies have to definitely report on. But there are some leadership indicators wherein SEBI gives a choice, and this will be an advantage for those early movers or corporates who are for quite some time in ESG domain. They would have that opportunity to also report into the leadership indicators. For example, one of this I could remember is getting the scope 3 emissions also mapped apart from the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. Energy consumption, how much electricity is or energy consumption is happening from renewable sources. So these type of things are coming under the leadership aspects. I'm sorry, I'm just rushing up, touching upon the key points because I do have a eye on the timeline. So BRSR, there are then other reporting frameworks, as Shubhranshu was also mentioning. Next slide, please, Avna. So the most globally accepted and the most prominent one out of these is the GRI framework, which have been here for quite some time. We have seen various versions of that. And very recently, we are also seeing in that GRI is thinking of aligning themselves either with the integrated reporting framework or other financial disclosure related frameworks. So it has to have a common platform, which we call as the integrated reporting, which has the financial reporting also and the non-financial reporting also together in place. So GRI definitely is very widely accepted, very widely used. Still corporates are using it, though they have an integrated report, but they will have a section marked for GRI. Integrated reporting, as we saw in the previous slides, that it is also gaining traction amongst the corporates because they want to have a common report, not have multiple reports coming out, have a common report, both for the financial and non-financial indicators. Then there are more specific indicators which do relate to either specific set of stakeholders or specific set of ESG related aspects. For example, SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. It is more inclined towards investors, towards issues related to investors. So accordingly, they have come up with their standard wherein they provide sector-wise material standards board, TCFD. They are more aligned towards climate change related aspects, CDPs, how corporates are monitoring their greenhouse gas inventory, how they are taking actions around that. Are they also mapping the risks and opportunities around that? Similarly, TCFD is another aspect around climate, or under guideline around climate change, which help mostly. It is most important for the financial institutions, how they can include climate change related risk in decision making for their investments. Similarly, we have UNGC, the United Nations Global Compact System. It is based on the 10 principles, but again, somewhere you will see they are aligned to the E, S, and G frameworks only. Just different type of nomenclatures, and these were developed for some certain different purposes. So with this, I think I am almost at my time. I will end it while there are few more slides wherein we can talk about these standards and guidelines in little detail, but probably we can take them also through question and answer. So thank you so much. Back to you, Shubhranshu.
Sure, we're open to questions now. We can take in a couple of questions.
Yeah, yes, thank you so much. We have got a question saying that how do companies set compelling sustainability targets and goals that appeal to the marketplace? And another question has been asked by Nipendra Jha saying that what is the method of measurement of ESG compliance of any company? Anybody would like to take it up?
Charyu, do you want to go for the latter?
Yeah, I can. So I can in fact take both of these.
Sure,
So
sure.
for the first question, wherein it was how to define targets. So yes, there is again, as I showed in one of my slides, there is an entire process for end-to-end journey, wherein at first it is very important to understand what are those material aspects for a particular organization. So once we have those material aspects, we need to understand what are the stakeholder expectations in case there are regulators around that. Have they defined any aspects around that? Basis that, and again, the exposure of that particular corporate to might be a national scenario and global scenario in case they have suppliers outside India also. Considering all these, we need to then define a strategy for them, which will also have long-term, medium-term, and short-term targets defined. For example, let's say if there is a corporate which is 100% India-based, domestically based. So for them, we will see that, yes, somewhere down the line, they will have to comply with this Indian commitment of 2070 carbon neutrality. So their actions, their targets would be more or less aligned to that. So in this fashion, there is as I said, there is a standardized process that defines first the important topics and then the strategies around that. I hope I have answered this one. Coming to the second question, if Sukanya, if you can just reiterate that.
Surely. It says, what is the method of measurement of ESG compliance of any company? While I come to that, there have been another question, and quickly let me put it forward by Mr. Arup Dotto, who says, please clarify scoring mechanism of BRSR.
So coming to the compliance of ESG as such, if we see just SEBI mandates to report on ESG, wherein they have defined and provided many pointers on which they want companies to respond, which can be either on a ESG policy, disclosure of greenhouse gas emissions, disclosure of raw material procured, how much of that raw material has been recycled. So these type of aspects. But yes, then in order, there are rating agencies who use this data and they have their own internal framework developed, wherein they do give weightage to various aspects around ESG. And this weightage is dependent on the type of stakeholders these rating agencies want to cater to. For example, these rating agencies may want to be a source for investors to take decision, then accordingly their framework will be developed in that manner. And they use these data, which is published in sustainability report, to come up with rating of companies, rating of sectors as a whole. So I think Avinav showed one slide during his presentation, wherein he did speak about the performance of various sectors around ESG. And we saw that financial sector was among the tops because they have been taking actions, they have been reporting on various aspects, they have been fulfilling and meeting the guidelines that are provided that we are just now seeing on this slide. So with that, I talked about the compliance part, though there is no compliance as is required within India as of now. It is just the BRSR meeting the guidelines, meeting the disclosures that have been defined.
Just a quick add-on here. There are few indicators under ESG that are also required and expected as per the national regulations. For example, reporting on other emissions like SOx and NOx. And SOx and NOx for heavy industries, you have a limit beyond which you cannot emit. So unfortunately, as far as emissions are concerned, unlike some geographies in India, there is no compliance, while there are energy related compliance like PAT scheme for heavy industries, right? So there is certain intersection of compliance expectations, and also that is intersecting with the sustainability or ESG reporting on different KPIs. Yeah.
Thank you, Abhinav.
So, Mr. Patnaik, if I can just ask one follow-up question. Like, we understand that this ESG is very relevant to a relatively large organization, particularly the listed ones. Whether this ESG is relevant to the relatively smaller organizations, how, or maybe on a middle level, how important for them? Is it completely voluntarily, or you see that maybe in few years from now, it may become mandatory on their part also to comply with certain set of regulations?
Yes, so I think the regulations are a continuum. It's already showing the path towards what will become in the future. So BRSR is one enabling framework to impose reporting obligations on the larger companies. But effectively, if you look at SEBI's own statement, they are looking at a pathway. This is to just the beginning, and they will make it mandatory on all listed organizations at some point. And similarly, the journey around IR also, although it is not mandatory, and IR is the acceptability of that framework is not as widespread. We will see some degree of non-financial reporting being obligated through some mechanism or the other over time. So that is one. From a reporting perspective, of course, that at least for listed companies, you will have an obligation going forward. So it is probably better to start preparing for it. Even if you're a small organization and not covered under BRSR, it makes sense to start preparing for it. But going beyond reporting, I think the point that I made, which is around exclusions, guard against those. Your business should continuously be assessing risks of not, of your product portfolio, of your, overall ESG performance, not being aligned to industry standards. If you're not, at some point, your stakeholders, which is your suppliers or your consumers, could start imposing obligations on you. We are seeing that in various industries. Some of the global brands, for instance, procure only from some suppliers who are specifically complying to their standards. And they have their own standards, they have their own mechanisms of assessing whether you have complied or not. They even partner with some of these organizations and make sure that they come up to those standards. So this is a journey. I think this is just the beginning where we are. And so therefore, assessing your own risks around exclusions, which is the minimum compliance and mandatory provisions that you need to align, not just today, but what's, anticipating what's going to come in the future and aligning yourself on those lines, along with the reporting standards. I think both should be definitely looked at.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It was so pertinent. With this, we would like to move to our third session, which is sharing perspective on ESG, outlining ESG journey and managing winds of change. I would now request Mr. N.P. Srivastava, Head of Environment Steel Authority of India, to share his presentation, followed by Mr. Nitish Ranjan, AGM Environment Steel Authority of India.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I, along with my friend, Mr. Nitish Ranjan, will be discussing our...
Mr. Srivastava, if we can just request you to put your video on so that audience can see.
Sure. Just hold on. Hi, everyone. This is Naveen Shrivastava from Steel Authority. And it was a delight listening to the speakers in the first two sessions. And in fact, there were certain technical glitches because of that we were offline for a moment. And apologies for that. In fact, Nitesh has prepared a lovely presentation. I will just touch upon the key areas and then he'll take over from me. Nitesh, are you there? Because there were certain issues with the Nitesh also. Nitesh?
Yeah. Yes, sir, I'm there. Good
Okay. Okay. So the difference between animals on the lighter side and the humans is that animals change themselves for the environment, but the humans change the environment for themselves. This is the irony. And in fact, nature provides free lunch to everyone, but only if we control our appetite. The first rule of sustainability is to align with natural forces, or at least not try to defy them. With this note, I would like to welcome everyone in this talk. And in fact, there are companies who have already taken the lead. And the sustainable development is a fundamental break because it's a game changer that's going to reshuffle the entire deck. And there are companies today that are going to dominate in the future simply because they understand that. And others will follow the suit. So definitely, I would like to congratulate this Bengal Chamber of Commerce for giving such a wonderful platform to all of us to exchange our ideas. This is not new because ESG, we are listening the sustainability. Earlier, there were so many issues related to environment. We have moved, we have evolved right from the Kyoto to the COP26. We have evolved as a industry, as a business houses, as an individual, as a nation. We have evolved. So we are now at least sensitized enough not to talk much on this, just to act on this. And we at SAIL, the leading steel manufacturer in the country, we are well versed with everything. We know our responsibility. We know our commitment. Our Honorable Prime Minister has already given the Panchamrit, that commitments to the global community. And in fact, we are in line with those Panchamrit to achieve the target. Country as a whole, then coming to the ministry, then cascaded down to the steel authorities, factories, the facilities, like various units. So we have already aligned our goal to Honorable Prime Minister's commitment, and we are looking forward to reduce our carbon footprint and water footprint, everything which basically holistically takes care of the globe, our earth. And in fact, you must be knowing that the steel making process itself is a very pollution intensive. The product is very eco-friendly. It's the last, every ounce is utilized thanks to the value of it. But the process itself is very pollution intensive, but we have enough scope because most of the steel from India is coming from BF route. And you all must be knowing that blast furnace is a unit, is a department where it's a highly carbon intensive, it's a highly energy intensive, and it emits a lot of gases. Although we are utilizing those gases down the line in our mills area all across the plant, but this is the time we'll have to think about beyond the compliance. Now we've started thinking of that. We have started landscaping, our technical landscaping, like going for hydrogen as a substitute. And in fact, we'll have to switch over from the fossil fuel to the green energy, like hydrogen can be one option. And in fact, in such a big plant, such a big technology, it is like we are operating with 100 years old technology. We are trying to retrofit because there are challenges in the retrofit. When you go for modernization, dovetailing some new technology, energy efficient technology to the old plant, it is like you are having a Mark IV Ambassador car and you would like to match it up with the latest Skoda and maybe the Jaguar and all. So there are challenges. But if we go for the modernization in greenfield, we have enough scope to incorporate the latest technology, the state of technology, the state of art, and the cutting edge technologies. And we are right on track. Our next phase of modernization, all units, be it is Rourkela, Bokaro, Bhilai, our technical consultants are trying their level best to come up with a technology which are basically in tandem with latest in the world. And as a steel producer, our in fact the water consumption was huge. Maybe there were days in 90s when we used to use around 30,000 liters of water for making a ton of crude steel. And from there we have come down to 3.5 liters. So and a lot of scope is there for implementing ZLDs and energy efficient technologies. We have reduced our carbon footprint also. And in fact, Nitesh will be telling you in the subsequent presentation and how we have chalked out the strategy at corporate level, at unit level. I just wanted to underline the things, just highlight some of the things which we are doing at Bokaro. And in fact, the sale as a whole also, we are basically, there were days when we used to flare up the gases. There were the converter gases, which we were not utilizing. And that has got very huge value in it, high CV gases. So we have started giving this, we have recently commissioned our converter gas holder. This gas are being utilized in our power plant, replacing almost 40% of the coal. All of the gases are going to our 3-4 boilers. And from there, we are generating electricity. Our captive plant is around 300 megawatt plant. Now, next thing is that we have a huge cooling ponds. These are the basically ponds which are used for cooling of the water and act as a reservoir also as a buffer for the steel plant. So we are going to have a floating solar power station, and that has got the potential of initial level survey has been done. That has got us potential of around 84 megawatt, a huge potential. And we have another reservoir. So we are planning to install the floating solar power so that we can generate our consumption. Our steel plant consumes around 150 to 200 megawatt electricity every, like that is our power consumption. So at least 50%, as our Honorable Prime Minister has already committed, by 2030, we'll be replacing our 50% of the fossil fuel with the renewable. So we are also as a unit, if every unit, every plant, every industry comes out with the 50% replacement. So we are planning as per the 50% replacement, and that is the best thing. Around 100 megawatt will be having 85 megawatt from the solar floating and 20 on the land-based. So approximately 50% of energy will be coming from this renewable one. So this is one big thing we are going to have. Now coming to geosequestration, there are technologies like recently we had a presentation at our corporate level that there are, the scope is there that from the blast furnace, we can capture the carbon dioxide, CO2, and we can give the go for the geosequestration. We are looking forward for the same also. So we are open to the all new technology. And as a Deloitte, they are basically have done a wonderful presentation. And Deloitte and so many good companies are there. They are good consultants. They can do some landscaping for the steel industry, for all the industry. So we'll definitely, we have a good workforce. We have the people who have basically can guide us that how we can go ahead, how can we technologically landscape our target to achieve those goals. So we are right on track, and we would like to hand over the session to Nitesh Ranjan with the note that we should not wait for well to dry before knowing the value of the water. So with this note, I would like to hand it over to Nitesh Ranjan. Nitesh, over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, sir. This is Nitesh, AGM Environment from SAIL, Industrial Authority of India Limited. I have a small presentation to share.
Nitesh ji, if you can just put your video on for before you start your presentation, okay, so that audience can see you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just sharing my presentation, and as our head of environment already, he already told that ESG has become important nowadays. And are you able to see my slides?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you can just put it on a full screen mode,
okay,
because audience are watching from their laptop and mobile, it becomes a bit difficult for them.
Okay, sure. So I do believe that ESG do create value for everyone, whether it's society, environment, company, or investors. And those companies who will reposition themselves as per the ESG requirement, definitely they will become more energy efficient. They will have less carbon footprint. They'll become more profitable. And companies who will consider ESG just as a compliance will, they will struggle. They will struggle to cope up with that. Ultimately, there would be regulations which will come. Then they will gradually become fall behind their competitors, become less profitable, and maybe close down. So that is what the next decade is all about. It's sustainability, and I think it's a competitive advantage that every companies need to take care of, so that they can prepare themselves for the future. And this is just our the chairman still of India Limited, Soham Mandal, and SAIL has become one of the member of Sustainability Charter for WSA on this 3rd March 22, and we do submit our CO2 emissions current footprint as per WSA guidelines, as well as we have also done our LCI, that is life cycle inventory of steel, and we are also working with Deloitte on our this internal carbon pricing. So as a responsible corporate, SAIL is trying to reposition ourselves on this ESG front, and accordingly we are working on it. And as our Naveen sir told, that steel is one of the most sustainable material which can be utilized 100 times without losing its properties. And the next decade, if we want to become a climate resilient society, then steel is going to play a big role. This is corkscrew design at Mexico, and this is your Sydney Harbour Bridge of Sydney, and this is your skywalk in China. So all these structure are possible only because of this steel, because steel is one of the world's most innovative and essential material that has low weight and high strength. And as sustainability, this sustainability tool that we all were talking about, environment, society, and your governance, and this is economic leg is there for fair wages, security, infrastructure. Environmental leg is there for zero pollution, waste, renewable energy. Social leg is there for working conditions, health services. And we also call this ESG as 3E, that is environment, economy, and equity, as well as 3P, that is people, planet, and prosperity. So all those things are interrelated, and right now has become very significant for the companies to prosper further. And as far as steel industry is concerned, it's in 2020 the figure was approx 2.5 trillion worth of products, and for every $1 of value, we further create $2.5 of value added activities. And as far as national steel policy of India is concerned, we are going to have 300 million ton capacity by 2030. So it will have a lot of effect on environment, social, and governance field, ESG field, and overall sustainability field in the next few years. And still, we need to come out with solutions of making decarbonize our activities, our processes. And as already told by Naveen sir, we are working on that through carbon capture, how we can replace coke through hydrogen, and we are working along with the RDCS team. So, so it's still the foundation of the last 100 years of progress of humanity, and it will be the for the next 100 years, it is going to be equally important. So basically, I will start with this slide. This is the frequency of cyclones that have emerged over last few years. You can see that the frequency has increased over a period of time. This is and this is Kolkata and Bengal. This is the picture of that. And because of this climate change, one of the major issues that would be faced would be your Bangladesh as well as West Bengal, as well as other coastal countries and cities across the world. This is the water stress that
you can see India is on a stress zone. Sorry to interrupt, Nitish.
And, yeah.
Your slides are not getting changed.
Okay. I will just share it once again.
Just refresh it and share it again.
Okay, I will just refresh it once again. So I will just share it once again, my slide.
You're not.
Is it visible right now? Yeah. As I told earlier, ESG is a win-win situation for all society, environment, and company itself. And this is one of the sustainability fulcrum. You can see that currently there are legal standard, then there would be international standard, best practices, and then it would become the business requirement in next couple of years. This ESG parameter, and these are the sustainability driver. We have right now the public, NGOs, investor, employees, customer. They all have become very much aware of what they need. They have become very much aware of sustainability. Right now, customer wants steel which have less carbon footprint, They want product which are eco-friendly. Then there are government regulations, and then there are ESG funds, business driver, competition. So everyone, and it has been seen over a period of time, there is a correlation between ESG parameter and financial performance of the company. Those company whose ESG performance is good, generally their overall profitability has been found to be much better, because it's a sort of system which take care of various parameter and ultimately helps in company coming out with innovative solutions, so that they become more energy efficient, more environment friendly, more attract talents, and they can easily comply with the regulators. So why company? So the question arises, why companies should disclose this ESG information in the form of this report? So the issue is, right now investors are looking for this data because they want to be sure whether the company has a strong ESG plan and practice in place, whether the company in which I'm investing, whether it's going to be last. Regulators are looking on sustainability report to validate the compliance level. And employees are right now, they are keen to join those companies who have a good ESG background and who are working on it. So ESG report also throw on opportunity and risk that will arise over a period of time, and that and how company will handle it. So all those things will cover under this ESG information. Now the question arises, is ESG optional? As I told, companies who will not reposition themselves as per ESG needs, they will struggle to cope up and ultimately fall behind competitor. On the other hand, companies which will work on it will gradually thrive, and overall their performance, including financial performance, will improve.
It is like, it seems some glitches are still there because your slides are still not moving.
Okay. I will. Yeah, I will share it once again. I think there is some.
If there is an issue, should I try from my side?
I will just share it once again, sir. In case there is an issue, I will just you can share. I think there's some. Right now, is it visual, sir? Is it visual? So what I wanted to communicate, that basically ESG, there is a changing demand of customer. It has been found that sustainability marketed product grow faster, approximately 5 times faster than non-sustainable product, and this is going to happen with this electric vehicles, and solar. And there has been found a drastic cost reduction by adopting ESG strategies in terms of saving energy, water consumption, packaging material. There are regulatory relief. Profit is at risk because of regulatory penalties that can be mitigated using this ESG tools, and also it improves the relationship between regulators and companies. So basically, ESG also attracts funds at a premium value, what my earlier speaker used to told, and it's basically it's also creating opportunities for companies who can come forward and can give solutions to industries how they can operate in a sustainable way, and by taking care of environment, and society and government's front for a period of time. So there's a lot of scope for startups who can come out with innovative solutions, and who can help industry like steel to decarbonize, who can help industry like mobility to having affordable mobility solutions, who can come out with for power companies, so that they can come out, they can produce power, renewable energy on a scale that is affordable for everyone. Now, so ESG is also competitive advantage because it's give a comparison between your peers and your performance over a period of time. It creates a system, it impacts your business, it helps in managing and mitigating risk. So this is waves of innovation. If we can see, the last wave was IT. The next wave that is going to surpass the whole world is it's sustainability wave, because right now because of this climate change, companies need to redesign their business model. They need to come out with they need to adopt technologies which are green and which are environment friendly. So whenever we go for a new expansion and modernization at sale, we go for technologies which are energy efficient, which are green, which have a long lasting impact on reducing our carbon footprint. So the next wave, that is sixth wave of innovation is going to sustainability. And we need to, from design, that is something called DOE, design for environment. So from design and inception phase itself, we need to think about how we can minimize our consumptions. So reinventing of business model is one of the thing that is part of the ESG, that is adoption of green technology and technology from villain to savior. So this is one unsustainable take, make and waste model in which we take raw material from the mines and we just simply throw it out. But this model is not working right now. And the next model is your this sustainable take, make and reuse model. And this is one of the this is the enterprise perspective as far as sustainability is concerned. There are environmental issues, they are changing economic system, they are changing in business model, and they are changing role of stakeholders. And in all those things, this ESG and sustainability report plays important picture. As far as the legal framework of ESG is concerned, there are environmental laws in India, such as Water Act, Air Act, and Environmental Protection Act, in which we have this National Ambient Air Quality Standard, noise pollution, e-waste. So this provides some sort of framework as far as ESG is concerned. These are something which is mandatory for the companies who are operating in a particular region. And this, as already told by Navi Panchamrit, this is what what is India has committed in this COP26 at Glasgow. That is, we have to produce, we are going to produce 500 gigawatt of non-fossil energy. 50% of energy would be renewable. We are going to reduce our carbon emission by 1 billion ton by 2030, and our carbon intensity will reduce by 45% by 2030. So for doing all those things, this is the commitment of India that would be, that has to be taken care by corporates, because SAIL has already got some targets based on this Panchamrit. And recently, all the big corporate houses are actually repositioning themselves to fulfill this commitment of India. And this is the firm's response as far as environment is concerned. Firms can, it may be a competitive advantage. Firms can adopt this environmental cost leadership, eco-efficiency, or beyond compliance leadership or eco-branding. They can eco-branding their product, and this will help them.
Can you go for a full screen presentation, because slides are again not moving? Because,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
because once the slides are there and what you're talking, I said they should correlate.
Okay. So, sir.
Yeah.
So, as we know, this GHG emissions, there's GHG emission, there's scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emission. If we see this scope 3 emission, this is scope 3 emissions talks about how our suppliers and contractors, what is their emissions, greenhouse emission. So most of the companies are able to control this is scope 1 and scope 2 greenhouse emission of their own operation. But right now companies are moving for scope 3 control of scope 3 GHG emission. For that, they are selecting suppliers and vendors who have ESG's policies at place, who have good practices. And that's why it's going to be very important for all the industries at Jharkhand, Bengal, and many MSMEs, how they position themselves as far as their GHG carbon footprint reduction. It may happen in next few years that company may demand steel whose carbon footprint is less than 2.0. They will procure raw material from that source only where the carbon footprint is less. In that way, it will help them to reduce their scope 3 emission. They may engage with suppliers who are having proper ESG policy in place. So that's why it's going to be very important for ESGs, for MSMEs, as far as ESG is concerned. So there are social framework which include, there were more than 40 labor laws across India that has been right now converted into 4 major labor codes, that is Code on Wages, Industrial Relations Code, Codes on Social Security, and Occupational Safety, Healthy and Working Condition Code. So most of the your good companies, MSMEs, they need to fulfill this social compliance as far as ESG is concerned. Then there, from governance point of view, there is Company Act and there is BRSR, that what we were talking about, in which sustainability reporting has been become mandatory by next financial year for 1,000 listed companies, and this suit is going to follow further, and this will further expand. There are ESG fund, which are premium fund. There is, I think, more than $40.5 trillion ESG fund across the world, And in India, there's more than 45,000 crores of ESG fund, including SBI, Magnum Equity, Access ESG, Quantum India ESG equities. These funds generally, so companies who want to decarbonize themselves, they need, strong, a big amount of fund for this technology upgradation. For that, this ESG fund may play a good role, and ESG funds is attracted by those firms who have a strong ESG policies. So in that way, ESG is going to play a picture. As far as ESG report is concerned, SAIL has its own sustainability report that is there at SAIL website, and we basically disclose all these three factor: environment, social, and governance. And it's basically measuring, disclosing, and being accountable for internal and external stakeholders, and it's a reasonable and balanced representation of our sustainable performance. So the basically SAIL follow this GRI framework, and we had involved Deloitte. I think it's on 11.
I would like to supplement here. For the information of all. We had gone for a modernization. We have phased out an ingot route, and in fact, just wanted to let everybody know that for 0.1 ton of crude CO2 reduction, we had to invest around 500-600 crores. That means huge investments are required if you go for energy efficient technologies, replacing the old technologies. But since we are committed to the PAT mechanism, we are committed to this environment, and we are committed to the globe. So we are already on. We are just going ahead with all the modernizations. In fact, thankfully, the steel market is booming. So this is the right time. We have already chalked out a plan for a greenfield 5 million ton new steel plant with all latest technology. So basically, just at the outset, with what I told, that the basically technological landscaping for the brownfield is the constant. Once you go for a greenfield expansion, you have enough scope. Is that right, Nitesh?
Yes, definitely.
Huge investment is required for every point. Even the 0.1 ton of CO2 reduction, you need crores, hundreds of crores of rupees. Okay.
Yes. So yes, sir. So in our greenfield project, we are going to place, all the latest technologies that would be environment friendly, which would be carbon efficient, with having less carbon footprint. And we are also, trying this EAF route, as well as this how we can, along with our RDSS team, how we can replace this coke with hydrogen. So this is GRI reporting standard that SAIL follow, and we follow basically GRI G3 guidelines. And this is the main structure, which include disclosure 102, then management approach 103, economic GRI 200, environmental GRI 300, and social GRI 400. These are the whole gamut that we are following at SAIL for coming out with our ESG report. And basically, we identify and engage our key stakeholders and their information need. We do materiality mapping, mapping of their needs and expectations. We do, and we have found that some of the stakeholder needs were contradictory, and so they need to balance. We had stakeholder communication management, report findings, and setting of goals and policies. This is our materiality assessment that we done for environment, and this is our stakeholder inclusiveness, stakeholder context, and this is our GRI sustainability report principle that we are following. And so in GRI 102, we are basically giving our organization profile, strategies, ethics, integrity, governance. And 103, we are giving our management approach. 200, economic performance. In 300, we are covering environmental performance. And in 400, we are covering our social performance. And this is the way we are going at SAIL. We first had a stakeholder engagement model. We identify and capture their views. We assess and evaluate the issues, prioritize our issues. We identify sustainability indicators. We prepare action plan. Accordingly, we implement and communicate. And this is our mapping, materiality mapping along with the stakeholder concern and our business impact. And these are the few glimpses of our, sustainability reporting. We had a MOU with ICAR for development of steel slag based cost-effective, eco-friendly fertilizer for sustainable agriculture, inclusive growth. And we are also working at West Bengal on this project. And this is
we are actually seeing some other presentation.
Okay. So I will just, I think, share it once again.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Nitesh. So I think we are short of time. We are running out of time.
Okay, I'm just going to conclude.
Yeah.
So basically, this is the sustainability report of SAIL, in which we have disclosed our various environmental, social, and governance performance, and what are our policies and what are our goals over in the next few years. What are the risks? What are the opportunities we are going to have, and how we are going to mitigate them? So all those things have been covered in our SAIL sustainability report, that is also available on the SAIL website, and that is as per GRI framework. So, that's all from my side. Yeah, this is our renewable rooftop solar system at our plant at Durgapur Steel Plant as well as ISCO Steel Plant. So I will just end my presentation with this quote of Mahatma Gandhi: "Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed." And I think ESG efforts, ESG is going to play a very big role in shaping the future of corporates over the next few years. Thank you, sir. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much. It was really a wonderful presentation from SAIL. So we have few questions. Like the first question is, what are the main challenges to the continued growth of sustainable investing? Would request if somebody can take it up. Mr. Gupta, would you like to say a few words on what are the main challenges to the continued growth of sustainable investing?
Yeah, so I think some of the aspects that panelists, Mr. Naveen and Mr. Nitesh from SAIL did cover, that yes, we are seeing a change in climate and many other aspects. So yes, it requires a lot of investment going forward. But yes, we do need to not see that as a burden for us. We need to chalk out opportunities out there and then take a informed business decision. So the winning thing is that how to make these challenges as opportunities for us, which can be in form of new type of products, to new type of service offerings that can come out of that.
Absolutely, Charu. I would like to add here, like we are not looking for the ROIs for when we are going for the sustainability investment sort of thing, like technology, landscaping. So we are not looking for the ROI. In fact, it comes automatically in terms of very intangible and tangible returns.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Abhimanyu Das has asked us, please suggest about the compliance with the modern technologies along with the nature.
Actually, modern technologies are aligned to the the theme, but what the essence of the nature, because we cannot go back to the original form of the nature, but we can align our activities in such a manner that it gives the minimal impact. And in fact, we should take all the care and precautions to mitigate what extra impact we are giving to our ecosystem. That we are already doing at every level, even at the concept level of any. Take care of that it should align with our ecosystem and it should give them minimal impact.
Thank you, Mr. Srivastava. Would anybody like to add anything, or I would now move forward and request Mr. Abhijit Bandopadhyay, the co-chairperson of the Corporate Governance and CSR Committee of the Bengal Chamber and also the partner of Deloitte Haskins and Sells LLP, to say a few words and begin with the closing remark. Begin with his closing remarks. Over to you, Abhijit, sir.
Thanks, Tupanna, and good evening to all of you. Excellent presentation by our Deloitte team. Thanks to Shubhranshu, Avinav, Charu, and of course the industry experts from SAIL, Mr. Naveen and Mr. Nitesh. I would just like to add my 2 paisa here. We have got a very good presentation on ESG saying that ESG is the future, and ESG is going to draw the picture and profile of future corporate and industries, right? So while it is said that it's a transition from profit-based reporting to not profit is everything-based reporting, or it's more like transition from not only the performance judged by how much profit do you make, or like how much reserves and surplus, how much net owned fund, how much assets do you have in a company, rather how much you are doing for the planet as a whole in the environment development, how much you are going to leave for your people in the future. That's called sustainability. Yes, the transition is like that. But I have a different perspective. I feel that even these acting enough on ESG or not acting enough on ESG will also have a large impact on the final financial reporting as well. How it is, like we talked about, a lot of studies have been undertaken on sectors and industries saying that we have mining and metal, we have oil and gas, we have power utilities, and in consequence to that, infrastructure, real estate, they are going to have difficulties if they have, since these are all low ESG score industries, right? And the banking and financial sector having high ESG score will also have it difficult because ultimately they will be lending to large corporates. And in India, if you look at the large corporates, they belong to these sectors and industries largely. Mining and metal would include cement, aluminium, steel, coal, oil, gas, power, all have large companies, and they are the main companies who get fund. Now, if they have low ESG scores, and in future, I'm sure the regulators are going to bring out a lot of regulations because of the global change. I'm sure the corporates in these sectors will find it difficult to procure fund from lenders, from investors. There will be stress on the operations. They will be finding it difficult to get the right leaders, right talents. And these stress on operation will have a stress on the profit and profitability as well. See, they have invested huge money on property, plant and equipment, which will have to be tested for impairment, thereby going to the loss. They will not have enough money to make investments, and there will be a mismatch between current asset and current liabilities. There will be an impact on the leasehold assets even because of the higher interbanking rate. So as a whole, there will be a stress on profit. As a whole, there will be a stress on the reserve and surplus and the net equity. So there would be a question of going concern for many of the large corporates. So being a chartered accountant, a man handling finance, I would see that doing enough on ESG or not doing enough on ESG will have a large impact on the financial reporting of such companies in those sectors which have low ESG scores. So my take is that we have to do it. It is not only that we are doing enough for the society, so for the environment, for the governance, we must disclose and we must act upon. The corporates in these sectors should get a message, should pull up their socks, and they should start doing enough so that they can ultimately have a stronger balance sheet or financial reporting. That's another way of looking at it, Shubhranshu. I'm sorry you have given a different perspective, but I, being a man of finance, I think I should make this point. So thank you very much once again for your time, and we are grateful. From BCC&I, I must thank both the teams from Deloitte and SEL, and from Deloitte, I should thank BCC&I. Hand it over to Sukarna. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. We are really thankful to the entire Deloitte SAIL team and also to the entire committee of the corporate governance and CSR of the Bengal Chamber. I would request Jitendra sir, do you want to add a few words here?
So nothing much, Sukanya. I think, and thanks our co-chair to bring a different perspective to what we are discussing for about last 2 hours or so. So while at the one end that, there is no option for, corporate like us to ignore this ESG parameter anymore. We have to ask our R&D to bring more efficient products. We have to ask our manufacturing to, bring, more manufacturing efficient process. And similarly, more demanding on the suppliers and vendors. But at the same time, we have to look at the cost parameter also. And, we have to look that the business has to survive. So only once the business survives, then this ESG comes into factor. So this will be very interesting, but as well as very challenging times, for corporates going ahead. But I think there is no escape. We have to live with it, and we have to navigate in the best manner as we can. So with this note, I think I once again thanks the entire team of the Deloitte, and personally to our team of SAIL of Mr. Srivastava and Mr. Nitesh also. And last but not least, the entire team of Bengal Chambers led by Sukanya. I think big round of applause to Sukanya for organizing this wonderful event. So that's all from our side, and I would just like Sukanya to just give your final remarks and then conclude the session.
Thank you so much, sir. It was very kind of all of you. On behalf of the Bengal Chamber, I would now like to propose a formal vote of thanks to you all. Distinguished panelists, valued delegates and guests, it is such an honor for us to get the opportunity to thank you and all the dignitaries who have joined us through our various social media handles. I extend my gratitude to thank Mr. Shubhranshu Patnaik, Partner, Consulting Power and Utilities, Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu, India LLP, Mr. Abhinav Prasad, Associate Director, Deloitte, Mr. Charu Gupta, Director, Deloitte, Mr. N.P. Srivastava, Head of Environment, Steel Authority of India, Mr. Nitish Ranjan, AGM Environment, Steel Authority of India, to take out time from their busy schedule and grace our occasion. Thank you for sharing your valuable inputs on a very pertinent topic like this. The session discussed insights on ESG and how to implement ESG reporting apart from the integrated reporting required for the business operation. We are confident that this workshop has facilitated the participants in understanding what successful corporates have done differently to integrate ESG into core operation. The objective of this workshop was to increase awareness on the ESG trends, stakeholders' expectation, and reporting the quality of ESG reporting and integration with other initiatives that are needed in ESG management. I must thank all our partners of the session without whose support the workshop wouldn't have been possible to organize. Along with the Bengal Chambers team, the workshop was organized in association with Exide Industries Limited, powered by CAC Limited, supported by Berger Paints India Limited, and definitely I would like to thank Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu India LLP for being the knowledge associate of this wonderful workshop. Along with our chairperson and co-chairperson, I would like to specially thank our committee members, Mr. Anjan Kumar Roy, Mr. Jagdish Patra, Mr. Ashok Purohit, Pawan Mardaji, Mr. Kaushik Mukherjee, Mr. Kundan Jha, Ms. Rupanjana De, Mr. Indranil Banerjee, and all other members who are there in the committee. Sorry if I've missed out any name. I would also like to thank each and every person who was associated with the program, my friends from my media fraternity, and also all the delegates who have joined us through various portals. Thank you. Keep on supporting like this. And we promise from the chamber that we will bring up such interesting sessions for you all. Thank you and good night to all.
Thank you, everyone. Just I wanted to add one thing. The formal workshop is over. The vote of thanks are over. As a man, we keep on growing. Like I just want to reproduce a quote. Like after a failed attempt to conquer Mount Everest, because we know the challenges are there in the industries. That Panchamrit targets are very stringent, very tough to achieve. But as a man, we can grow. As an industry, as a we can grow. So after a failed attempt to conquer Mount Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary remarked, because he failed so many times, then he conquered. After a failed attempt to conquer Mount Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary remarked, and he talked to mountain, the Everest, I will come again and conquer you, because as a mountain, you cannot grow, but as a human, I can. And rest is the history. And last May, har roj girkar